Hi everyone, I'm Sean and I'm in Cape Town, South Africa. I wish I would be there in person in Portugal with a lot of you, but maybe another time. Right now, we're doing this virtually. So I head up publishing partnerships and business development at the largest mobile game publisher in Africa, where we focus on both regional and global deals. And I'd like to take this time to answer questions people have about Africa. I often get a lot of questions about it because a lot of people don't know much about it. So would like to use this time to make it as interactive as possible. So if people have questions, there is a link available to come join in. But in the meanwhile, I'll just start off and share a few common questions that I get asked. So as an example, one of the most common questions I get asked is, when people talk about Africa, they think about it as a country. So it's actually a continent, and there's 54 countries in Africa. And so we need to have different strategies about approaching different countries and how things are done from a localization perspective. And also to share a bit more about us as a company and how we got to where we are. So we were initially a content creator, and we launched a trivia app which was made in-house last year. And we were actually the #1 free-to-play game in Nigeria and Kenya, and the #1 trivia app in South Africa and Ghana. And what we really wanted to do was to understand how come monetization is quite low in Africa. And a big reason for that is not a lot of people have access to credit cards. So what we started doing was working with local fintech companies in order to provide local payment solutions. And we noticed the conversion skyrocketed. We actually got on the radar of Google, and they were like, hey, you can't do that. So then you know you're doing something right when you're making that big of an impact. And we had over 1 million downloads. And I guess this was our so-called proof of concept in the market in Africa that there really is potential here. And we then pivoted to being a mobile game publisher. And effectively what we do is we chat with developers and publishers and studios about improving monetization on the continent. And the way we do that is we've developed a proprietary payment aggregator, which allows local payment solutions to plug in, because in different countries, there's different payment methods, there's different approaches. And we were actually recently accepted into the MasterCard Start Path program, where they accept 10 fintech companies globally for their financial solutions. So I guess we kind of a bit like a fintech company now, according to MasterCard, which is really exciting. And then what we're also doing is chatting with smaller developers and studios about global agreements. And so far, we've raised $4 million, 1.5 in a pre-seed and 2.5 in a seed round. And I think this is the most significant thing, because this is putting African studios and developers on the map and showing that there is potential here. And I often get asked the question, do you feel the pressure? Because a lot of companies and a lot of developers and studios are looking at what we're doing. And I like to look at it as, instead of pressure, rather support, because we believe that if we're able to succeed in our goals, we can really further shine the light on the talent on the continent and really get more people into this wonderful scene that we're all a part of. So, yeah, I thought I'd just start with a few minutes sharing a bit more about us. And please let me know if there's any questions, anyone wanting to ask. I'm here for it. In the meanwhile, while questions come in, I'll share a bit more about certain topics as and when it comes along.
Okay. Thank you, Sean, for your first explanation. I think we are super curious to, you are a mobile publisher, right? So do you think that the space for example, PC and console is still like emerging market? Do you think there's like opportunities there as well, or do you think like mobile is like a way to go, starting out something an industry that is developing itself?
Sure. No, that's a very interesting question for a few reasons. So I guess in Africa, for a lot of people, their mobile devices are their primary source of entertainment. So it's definitely a strong mobile market. There's about 400 million people that are gaining access to the web based on mobile, which is exciting, and just being connected in the digital age. I don't think I can reveal who it is, but I do know of a PC developer that has received prototype funding, and they're based in Africa. So it's showing that there is the potential in the market, and it is growing. I think I speak to people in the esports space and the scene, and a lot of people are very excited about the market. And I guess as we have more and more events and just more competitive nature, I think for a lot of people that space, there are, I guess, esports companies. A lot of them are part-time at the moment. So if you are thinking about Africa, at least this stage, I would focus on mobile. But as I mentioned, the fact that a company here is getting funding and that they are making titles, I think, again, just like what we're doing as a company and shining the light and getting more developers to develop for mobile, this company that has received prototype funding for PC, then that means that more developers are going to get involved here on the continent. More people getting involved means more of an interest. More interest means a growing scene. So I'm all about it. I hope that it grows beyond just what we do, because it's great for everyone.
Yeah, like that's super interesting that you're talking about the way that, again, developing the scene itself brings more interest, that brings more investment, that keeps on this ongoing loop of growth. So one of the first things that I'm super interested that you talked about is what other things other than the investment itself do you think are like key points to create that that growth in the development scene itself? Because basically, you know, it's like who comes first, like the interesting investment or the new games happening and cool things in the
Sure, no, absolutely. I think education's so important, and not just in Africa, but globally, in terms of creating that understanding. I'm never going to get sick of explaining what retention is to developers, whether it's on the continent or globally, because if people aren't aware about it, how are they meant to understand that that's a big part of publishers making decisions on games? And so I think that's very important. Education, more and more community events. There's a really interesting event that took place a few months ago called Africa Comic Aid. It was essentially a 2-week game jam, which is awesome. And I guess that's what, when things being remote, it allowed countries to come together. So there were countries who participated from Nigeria and the Ivory Coast and Senegal and South Africa and Kenya and Ghana and Egypt. And it's just more and more countries working together, developers from all over exchanging ideas. And that can only be good for everyone. And prizes were coming up and people just becoming more aware. And so I feel that's important. I feel those who have been fortunate to have success, to share that success with others, because ultimately, at least in my belief, I believe that a rising tide lifts all boats, and one should help others out. And so sharing that knowledge, having more talk, I mean, events such as this, I mean, it's amazing for the scene in general, and it's such a credit to Nerd Monkeys and the rest of the team. Diogo, hey Diogo, if you're listening. And ultimately, it's great because if you're able to create these kind of activations, talks, just knowledge sharing opportunities for people, it can really bring the scene together. So it's something that we look at. It's something that we, as Carry First, like to help out and collaborate in the scene, talk with developers, do events. There's one happening next week in the Ivory Coast. And again, just sharing knowledge, just helping out. Something, if I may also just add, that a lot of people aren't aware of this, but the average age in Africa is 19, which is amazing, because it means that it's the youngest and fastest growing demographic globally. And essentially what the data shows is people want to communicate and play games. And it shows that it's a market that is really primed for the scene, and really a massively untapped market that people haven't previously thought about. And I was chatting to someone who's quite prominent in the scene in Southeast Asia, and was essentially talking about a lot of the trends that we're seeing in Africa. That's how Southeast Asia was 5-10 years ago. And that's very encouraging for our scene. You look at what's happened in India, where data prices dropped and the scene just absolutely took off, and it's becoming a really strong emerging market. And so, well, in Africa, data as it stands is still very expensive, so we have some way to go. It is exciting to see these sort of things.
Yeah, and not only that, but also like the ability to access easier ways of payment, right? So the thing you're describing earlier on, that is one of the most important things in I think in those types of emergent markets, because I remember that was one of the key elements in South Asia, right? People having access to not a credit card, but like other types of ways to be engaged with their entertainment. And one other thing is, like, you're saying about all of these events being more available now, right? Because of, like, again, online events and things like that. And for example, I know that Africa Games Week is going to happen earlier December. Do you feel like in a way this COVID situation as well helped for this push and incentive to make people more engaged, I guess, with markets and scenes that they didn't recognize before?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's accessibility. For a lot of people in Africa, don't have the funds to travel to the big conferences globally. And with online conferences occurring, it's lowered that barrier to entry. And then it's further things such as support, like good relationship from the team from Meet to Match, and working with them. I've organized thousands of dollars worth of tickets for free to give to developers on the continent here. And it really goes a long way, because it's always the dream. And I love hearing stories about any developers signing contracts or getting interest. But even taking it a step back and just being exposed to how it works and how things happen at conferences, and meeting investors, meeting publishers, being a part of the scene, chatting with other developers. As I said, it's so vital that people take for granted, who've been in the scene for a long time, that just know, oh, this is how it works. So again, it comes to that level of education. It comes to just that support, because there is talent around. And again, talent comes from nurturing it as well. And we all look at the great success stories of games, whether we look globally at the phenomenon of Fall Guys, but no one really talks about the many games they made before then. The same with Rovio, with Angry Birds, where they made over 50 games before they got to that massive success. And it's always the dream. Like, there's an amazing story that's one of my favorites of the year. A developer in Ghana who is making games part-time, and during COVID, he had some extra time and he made a racing game. His name's Dinasto, and the game's RWC Racing. And he thought, hey, if like 5, 10 people download the game, that would be great, and excited. And what happened in Ghana, they started featuring the game, articles, press releases, just loads of support in the country. And he actually ended up getting about like 100,000 downloads, which for a part-time indie, it was just so much euphoria and excitement. And then companies such as Apple were reaching out and being like, hey, can we help out? And just situations like that, Huawei as well. And all this came about, it's the indie dream basically. And have been in discussions with him and just giving him support, explaining to him about analytics and why it's important, and which programs to implement and how to monitor it and support. And I think I want to hear more stories about that. And in Africa, that's great, but just for everyone, really. Even people maybe watching this right now, are like, it's the so-called dream, the dream to be continued, of course, because you want that exposure to lead to deals, to the game, getting out there, 500,000 downloads, 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, making good money, being able to build a franchise. Like, it's building blocks, but you have to start somewhere. And stories such as that really bring a smile to my face.
Yeah, I think you're saying it all. It's like just if we share those positive moments and also recognize the similarities with markets as already passed through to where we are at the moment, there's like this motivation and this, again, escalation of growth. It's just because just having that like leading by example, right? So if you recognize in others things that you can do, steps that you can take, and go forth, I think even if you feel like in your geographical reality, things are not as evolved as in other areas, just having that global support, I guess, in a sense, helps you immensely as a developer, even if you're a solo developer or just like an indie studio starting out. I think that's why people like Rami Ismail are like so important in our community, right? Because again, they're relatable. You can see they're someone that passed through those same struggles, and yeah. So in a like bigger scale, seeing that happen in communities, is really self-assuring, I guess, in a sense.
No, absolutely. And yeah, like there are certain misconceptions here as well, and rightly so, according to data, and why people don't give much thought to Africa. Like, a lot of people think there isn't much money on the continent. And I guess a great case study for this is in Nigeria, and very cash-driven businesses such as sports betting. So there are companies making billions of dollars. For those who are fans of the English Premier League, Sport Pesa, which is a company in Africa, sports betting, was sponsoring Everton for a while, and it kind of just shows the global scale and the reach that they've had. And that's, I guess, just, there's a whole lot of reasons as to why, like just whether it's lack of credit card, even bank accounts, and how things are done. But things are just done differently here. And a great example as well is in Kenya. It's called M-Pesa, which is mobile money. And essentially, I believe last year, 50% of the country's GDP went through mobile money, which is insane.
It's insane, yeah.
I mean, I think it is the highest adoption for mobile money globally. And that's showing like advancements in its own way and just how things are done. So it's just about breaking down the barriers for accessibility and how things are done and working through it. And we believe that's one of our unique selling propositions, that we can do so. And more importantly, just realizing that how things are done in certain markets isn't the only way. And a great example is the massive emergence many years ago in China, and why people have so many partners in China in terms of their games and getting their games out there, because it's just markets that people don't understand in getting out there. So it's important to do that, whether it's in tier 1 markets, tier 2, whichever markets it is, or emerging that one doesn't understand, to reach out, get that support. And I think it's also important to identify what are your strengths as a developer, as a studio, because ultimately I remember I had like a bit of a panel about self-publishing versus publishing. And you'd think, being a publisher, I've got such a bias to be like, no, you have to use a publisher and everything. And I actually don't, because I believe you should find the right fit for you and find the right partner, play to your strengths. And I think whether it's indies, whether it's larger companies, finding the right fit for you to complement your strengths as well is so important. Because if you're better at making the games and rather want to spend your time there, then it makes sense to find a partner to help with the marketing and the user acquisition. But if you come with experience and knowledge how to do that, then you should utilize that and find what works for you. Reach out to people in this industry who are incredibly friendly and supportive. And this is globally speaking, which is it's amazing to see. I come from a business background, and I can't remember how business used to be, because it's very different to how it is in this industry. So yeah, I think it's important to take a moment and realize how lucky we are, and utilize the resources out there.
Yeah, that is for sure. Like, I remember when we first met, right? So even Pedro, hey, even when maybe what we were looking for didn't match exactly, for example, or like our game, or like the project, it's not like a fit for a specific type of publisher. I believe like just having the conversations and creating those connections and having those insights and being like, okay, but oh, maybe I know someone, or maybe it's like, oh, maybe I can give feedback on your project as well. And all of those interactions are super valuable in our industry. And what I find is more people that I know in here, it's more than not, everyone is available for your questions to help you grow. I think there is a strong sense of community even in the business side of game development. Yeah.
No, absolutely, and we can chat offline about the intros I made for you and whether how that's been going and everything else. I don't know if it's best to share that live, you know.
No, sure. I was just like sharing the fact that we could share that, right? So we could have that, just like that bond, that automatically kind of bonding of recognizing in each other that you are trying to do something in this industry that connects to what I'm looking for, right? So it's a lot more personal that it seems sometimes. And another thing is like, I believe that one important part of game dev is networking, not just the sense of like who gets to network better or this or that, but it's a collaborative process, just like making the game itself, right? So all other parts of game making and selling it or putting it out there, it's only natural that they have that collaborative experience attached as well. And so what I can recommend more strongly to everyone that is listening is just it is sad that we all in-house and the events are not happening physically, but enjoy this opportunity to go to different things that you wouldn't otherwise, and again to try and go to Africa Games Week, to go to big in Brazil, to go to different events that are happening across the globe, and in markets that you probably didn't think about before. So if there's a takeaway, I hope that this is it.
No, absolutely. it's important, and some people, they do get like so-called, what is called in industry now, Zoom fatigue. It's a lot of meetings, a lot of conferences. Don't feel bad if you're experiencing it. It's normal. And ultimately, yeah, it's a case of try your best and try take the opportunities where possible, because especially whether you might be on a budget, it can be really helpful. And who knows, this could be you to connect with a potential investor, publisher, or even a potential business partner for collaboration, whether it's in Africa or just globally as well.
Mm-hmm. I would say one more thing, Sean. By the way, you mentioned the idea of like matching, matching partners. And I will say that not just like publishers, because it can be like a bunch of different things, right? For like an investor or even another studio to help complement your strengths together whenever you're looking for someone. And one thing that I think is super interesting, again, it's the idea of connect with someone that is trying to do the things that you like as well, and not just what the market says right now, for example, because I think that's what you did, right? So it's like, okay, there wasn't a mobile publisher in Africa, but you were like, why not? And it's that sense of maybe that isn't because there's not a market or there's not developers. Maybe that isn't just because no one started one and tried it first. And I think it's super important to have those I would say visionaries, but I know this is a strong word, but like people that can find different directions that other people aren't going to, and maybe the market doesn't exist, but maybe it is, and it's just like a case of you're not providing what people are looking for, and you need to find those patterns that show you that. And I feel that's very strongly for the project that we're doing at Our Monkeys as well, with things like short games. And again, and for example, I feel like that connects a lot with the reason why women gamers tend to be like in bigger numbers for things like mobile, right? Because there's like experiences that are a lot shorter. So if you can bring those short experiences on other platforms, you can bring that audience as well. And all those little elements are cool things to look for partners that they are thinking the way you do. They are thinking in those niche markets, those missed opportunities, and they are willing to trail a path with you.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I mean, yeah, I'm not going to label us visionaries, but we do have a first mover advantage in the market. And again, I think the biggest question, people say, well, where do we start? Because as I mentioned before, a lot of people just, it's not on the radar in terms of Africa and it being a market. I guess the exciting thing is, as well as the average age here, there's 1.3 billion people on the continent. So it's a massive market, it's a massive opportunity. And I guess different markets have different strengths, different approaches. And two things I want to bring up. Egypt, number one, which is it's a whole conversation in and of itself, and localization. And in terms of Egypt, so with a lot of games, particularly with like battle royale shooter games, for a lot of the successful titles out there, if you look at the data, Egypt is constantly in the top 10 to 15 countries in terms of downloads. So it shows people are consuming the content very well. Purely on downloads. Again, monetization comes into it because of payments, and that's a whole other discussion in and of itself. But the fact that there is a market out there, that there is that excitement. Something that I feel is very interesting when a lot of people ask me this, language, what do we do? And so, sure, like, I guess for English, there are a lot of English speakers on the continent. I feel localization is definitely important, but it's not localization that you think in terms of in-game, but more localization in terms of the content marketing. And a great example of this is a game Gabetta, which is a game we signed. It's an indigenous board game, Mancala, and it's popular across Africa, Southeast Asia. Like, I guess the beauty of a game such as this, everyone thinks they invented it, which is great because it's got its own kind of name. And a great example is in Nigeria, Mancala is actually referred to as Ayu. And so, if you are aware of this, when you market the game, you don't talk about it being a Mancala game, you talk about it being an Ayu game. And it's just about those kind of certain things where having that understanding of the markets can essentially make or break the success of your game, not just from a keywords perspective, but just from a people resonating with it, because clearly there's an appetite for it. It's just about getting it out there. Languages that are popular here, so Swahili, over 100 million people on the continent speak it. And so again, it depends on the game. If it's a typical like match 3 game, it's not that pertinent. But what would be really interesting to do is if you have like a word game, like a typical like Scrabble Go, and you localized it into local languages, whether it's Swahili, Yoruba, Hausa, those type of languages, no one's really marketed those type of word-based games in people's, I guess, home languages. And that's going to be exciting when that happens. And we're experimenting with it and seeing the results. And again, it's exciting because your game might not be top of the charts in terms of the best ever word game, but if people resonate with it, that's how you really succeed. And then it does become a top of the charts type of game. Markets such as this, where no one's marketed aggressively towards, that's great because it's uncharted waters. So you can reach audiences and really grow your game and grow your following and climb up the rankings and really test the robustness of your game. Because the eCPIs are lower here on the continent, which CPI cost per install. So ultimately, there's a lot of positives when you're looking at emerging markets from that perspective, getting out there if you don't have the budget. Everyone loves the tier 1 markets, of course, because it gives the best return. But the negative is everyone's marketing there, and therefore will your game get lost in that? Your costs are going to be higher to get out there. So building a bit of a following, understanding audiences, it's really important. And again, it's also genre dependent. It's important to know which approach are you going to use in terms of the audience, in terms of what are you wanting to do. And my answer to developers and just people thinking about this market and just markets out there in general, if you're a hobbyist and you make games because you enjoy making games, that's okay. Like, play to do things the way you want to do it. If you're looking for opportunities, well, great, look at emerging markets. If you're looking where you've got the budget and you've got the balance and you want to go in the tier 1 markets, again, it's all about just taking a moment, having a bit of a strategy and understanding that. Because if you have that approach, understanding, strategy, you can really get your game out there and hopefully make it a success.
Yeah. Pedro, do you have any question? Yes.
Yeah, I had like 3 questions that were already answered. But from in terms of business, how do you test the games in those markets? Because let's say in Europe, we test a lot of mobile games with the North American market, and we already know the CPIs that we are aiming for,
Yes.
and which ones are going to be a success or not, or more probably a success. But in these emerging markets, how do you know that? Like, how do you get the numbers to work around it and say if it will be a good game or not in terms of business?
Sure. So effectively, it's about doing a market test and about assessing it based on particular regions, based on being strategic, whether you're looking at like Nigeria or South Africa or Kenya, and then getting your games out there. it's very popular. What people do is, like, when we're talking tier one markets, what people do is they, instead of testing their game out in the US, they rather do it in Canada. So they do markets that are similar in order to just get those benchmarks without releasing your game too early here. And it's the same with in terms of what is the type of game and where are you wanting to go in terms of approach, and looking at data, looking at trends of how games have performed here in the past. I mean, Candy Crush is a global phenomenon everywhere, and it's popular on the continent as well. So you look at countries where match 3 games are really popular and say, okay, great. Well, we're going to do our market tests here and see how do our games compare there. And then it's very similar, like distribution via whether it's Google Ads or Unity or Facebook. Ultimately, you can do it. It's the same approach. Again, it's like localized listings do play a part. But again, you'll get your numbers. It's the same. Distribution, we distribute through like Google Play and Apple. Again, at least for now we do. We've toyed around about creating our own store, and let's see what happens in the future. But for now, I guess our payments is our real unique, one of our unique selling propositions.
Yeah, but you were saying that you had some problems.
Oh, sure.
It's against the rules to receive payments without bypassing their payment method with the Visa cards and stuff.
And yeah, to elaborate further on that. So Google, there is more flexibility on that, I guess. Where the gray area exists is if it was a direct web download, you are able to use alternative payments. But when it's a direct download from the Play Store, then it needs to go through there. So it's because the downloads were originally through Google Play where the so-called issue was. But personally, like, we have a really good relationship with Google and Apple actually as well. They're really supportive about what we're doing on the continent. And it's for us, and I mean, let's not touch on the whole Epic Games situation and everything what's going on there. But for us, it's more about accessibility. So it's not a case of cutting Google out of things and cutting them out of the equation, but just about providing the means. So it's dialogue we constantly have with them. And again, it's how things are done in emerging markets. I guess one of the biggest issues with the whole US situation is because of that market. But then web downloads and stores, there's popular stores that PUBG are using in Asia, where it's mobile web stores in order to increase your revenue. And I think, without naming the company, I think it's their second biggest revenue driver. And it's one of the top mega companies around. So it shows that there is a market. It's just people don't understand it or talk about it. But there are ways to go around that because of the open source approach of Google. Obviously, with Apple, it's a different discussion altogether. Yeah. But then I guess so. And I think if I may just add, that's a perfect opportunity to just share that device capabilities and how it is in Africa. And so it depends on who you ask. Some people think it's exclusively only Android devices. I guess I've got an iPhone, so I kind of changed that. But also, I think it is about like an 80-20 split. There are a lot of secondhand iPhones that are entering the market. And generally, those who have iPhones, they have the means for payments and everything else, and generally have bank accounts and able to make payments. Ultimately, what's really important for developers out there is size of the app, because for a lot of people, they're having to make a decision: how much space do I have on my phone? And so we typically believe apps that are around 100 megabytes or less have a large chance of success here in these markets. There are exceptions. It's genre dependent. If you're talking about something such as football, it's massively popular here on the continent. So as an example, FIFA is going to be downloaded irrespective of size of the app, but then other apps will have to go. So it's something important to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, so yeah, basically in Europe, I do work for a mobile publisher, and basically in Europe, for like 2 years and something, we kind of forgot about that problem of the size. So we still have a problem with size, but it's not 100 MB. It's like we can go to 300 or something, and it's not a problem here with the phones we have here. We do have a great market in India because our games are normally very small and minimalist. So India is it's a big country for us that plays our games. Uh, but that's it. So basically, we always aim for the North America, Canada to test games, and so a lot of the problems we just talked about, it's not really a concern for us right now because it's not a problem in those countries. Let's say that there are more keen to spend money on our games. Um, but yeah, that's true. So for 2 or 3 years ago, it was still also a problem in Europe, the space thing, and not just that, the payment method. I remember when I was a kid, I used to play games on PC, and there was this payment method by phone. I think it was with a text message or something, and you'll spend the money from your phone, and it was great because it was the only way that I had to pay for stuff in that time. So I believe that that's probably where um, South Asia is right now. So it's really a great thing. But I still I'm still concerned about not just about the Fortnite thing because Fortnite was a great move for them, but it is in another country, in another market. But it's like when you say that you have agreed with Google some things, like you have that payment method that you bypass their payment method because you have to, not because you want to. Uh, but do they like propose you something? Like they take some care of it, or they are just like okay with it and you can keep everything you make?
Sure. So it's an interesting question, and there's from a technical standpoint, it's like a talk in and of itself. So I'll just go very high level on it because so as an example, we've got 200,000 distribution points at local spaza shops so people can buy vouchers for cash. Again, that's great because it's targeting those who don't have credit cards or bank accounts. So what will happen is people purchase the voucher, have the code, and then use the code, and then the code will then go into our setup and our system, and then the payment will go through. And so in that situation, it's very straightforward, and Google, I guess, are sorted there, but it wouldn't have worked without the kind of setup. When we're talking about web downloads and how things are done through the so-called store, like for us, we're looking at like vouchers for like Uber vouchers and everything else just through our platform. Like for us, it's beyond just mobile gaming as well, but just interactive content. And so ultimately, it very much just depends on what it is, how the approach is, and I guess it's constant dialogue because there's been various tests in emerging markets and things with Google. And again, I don't want to speak for them and share like that information, but just with trends and what has been seen in Africa and just how to really improve it. So they are very much aware. They're aware that how things are being done here and how to improve it. And yeah, we're here to work with them. We're here to be like, great, this is ways to unlock the potential because it's not about us cutting them out, but working together with them. And I think, and as you rightly said, it's a different market. And if it's a market where if you look at the data and they're making like literally nothing, they're far more open to if it's like the US where it's like, hang on, we're making a significant amount here. So I think it is also market dependent, and the discussions are there. And ultimately, I believe it's about working with a partner than kind of behind their backs or anything like that. So yeah, it's why we have the dialogue, and yeah, I will just keep it a bit maybe quiet in terms of the discussions, but
Yes. So basically, what
what
you are
is
saying
from
is,
their side. But yeah, like they really supportive of what we're doing, and it's really appreciated actually.
okay. So basically, what you are saying for people out there is don't be afraid of trying things and talk with big companies like Google or Apple. Just things will work out eventually.
I think one element that I'm just happy like hearing you guys talk, because I think that this is just all connecting to what Sean was saying earlier, right? About making finding those partners, and that partners that if the market is emergent, and if there's not like um, a way to do things like already set up, it's just like go talk to the companies that you need to work together with. And in this case, of course, are like those payment companies and the distributors and things like that. But I think it's just all part of that uh, multi, like recognizing all the areas where game, not the game development, but game distribution and publishing exist, and not be afraid to connect there. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And ultimately, it's finding ways to make things work and to just understand how things are done. Um, and it works both ways. It's obviously a lot more aggressive, and we don't like to see the so-called wars that we've seen. But the end result, Apple, it's been great for indies and smaller companies in terms of the 30% dropping down to 15% in terms of what Apple's taking. And that's great because ultimately, with that extra percentages, can reinvest in the studio, can grow the company, can hire more employees, and really improve things. Great.
Alexandre?
Hi there.
Yeah,
Hey.
can you hear me?
Hey, yeah.
Sorry if
Do you have a
I
question? Do you
was
want to
in.
join in?
Yeah, that's,
Let me just
yeah.
say something
Actually,
first.
it's not on topic right now, but I
One
was
section,
like,
one second.
Yeah, just give me
This
1 second. We have to finish this, wrap it up in 2 minutes. So I believe this will be the last question, and then we can.
it's just a little too late.
Yeah, I'm too sorry. Actually. But
But by the way, we can have, if Sean has time, we can continue the discussion on Discord channel and just like keep it up the conversation there. Yeah.
yeah. So what I was wondering, if because right now in Portugal we have a lot of courses and some companies taking internships with people coming out of the courses, people wanting to be developers, game developers. What's it like over there? If you have courses, like companies supporting, if you have like 2 or 3 big companies, or well, a few small studios of 3 or 4 people, what's it like?
Sure. Yeah, so it's an interesting one. At a few big universities, game design courses are being on offer, and again, that's fantastic. Quickly to answer that, I guess the biggest problem was a few years ago, no one was really looking at mobile, despite these courses being available, because they were like, we can't make money on mobile, let's not bother. Hopefully, we're looking to change that perception. Now that the courses are available, more going to be a part of it. Then ultimately, it's about working with the corporates. And again, that's something that I personally spend a lot of time on, just chatting with these companies and getting them out there. And gamification beyond just games is becoming more and more prevalent in corporates. And ultimately, that's great because people who've got the skills to be able to get involved. So it's just about connecting the two, which we're definitely doing. And as you create more case studies and more success cases, you're going to get more participating and putting capital behind it and building things. And there is actually something being built at the moment, kind of confidential, but advising on that and helping them get that. And that's really exciting just for the scene, because if we can show that, we can get talent, and hopefully talent on the continent rather than having to outsource abroad.
Happy to hear it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your participation, Alexandre, and to joining in, and Pedro's as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't know about the time. Sorry.
It's okay, and thank you, Sean, for taking your time to have this conversation with us all. I'll let you say like a final word to finish this presentation, and then we can move to Discord, keep it on, and guys, there's another talk coming soon.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone. Thank you both Mafalda and Felipe, and just the whole team really, for allowing me the opportunity to share some insights, and hopefully I answered some questions that I knew were coming as well, just because it's the typical ones. But if there's any further, I'll be in Discord and happy to continue the conversation. And also we'll be catching more of the talks. It's been a great day, and yeah, well done to your team.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.